In 2003, I was in New Zealand to compete in the Triathlon World Championships. It was an amazing time, a great opportunity. Susanna still tells the story of me returning home saying, "I found my people," which basically meant people that ate well, worked out, and went to bed early. I met some incredible athletes from around the world in the process, most notably world champion Barb Lindquist and Sheila Taormina, who went on to become the first person to qualify for the Olympics in 3 different sports. We literally sat there eating breakfast with these folks and visiting. But the most interesting person I met? Today's guest, Tricia Downing. Among a sea of mental toughness, resilience, and grit, none exceeded Trish. She'd become a triathlete after a serious bike wreck left her paralyzed from the waist down. While the rest of us swam, cycled, and ran the course, Trish did it with just her upper body. Incredible. We continued crossing paths after that trip, and she was actually one of our first coaches when we launched Catalyst Coaching to serve employees nationwide all the way back in 2007. Her incredible life journey has continued, and when I saw she was launching into yet another new adventure, I immediately reached out to see if she'd be willing to share her story with us. You're going to soak this one in. If this is your first time joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching Institute, the nation's top-rated health, wellness, and performance coach certification training program. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for making the Coaching Lab a part of your week. On the coaching front, there are a lot of people stepping into coaching roles. Some are pursuing roles as health and wellness coaches, others applying coaching strategies to their management and leadership roles, still others leaning into the high performance or executive coaching settings. Regardless of your chosen route, Catalyst Coaching is there to support you. As Fortune Magazine's #1 rated coaching certification and the program rated most customizable by Forbes Magazine, Catalyst has the resources you need to reach your desired outcome. Please reach out anytime. results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. We can set up some time to discuss your specific goals and how we can help you meet them. Is it time for a catalyst? We're here when you're ready. And now, it's time to tap into the wisdom of Tricia Downing on the latest episode of the Coaching Lab podcast. Trish, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited about this. I mentioned in the intro, you and I met like 1,000 years ago at the Triathlon World Championships in New Zealand, and I met some amazing people there, but I remember you more than any of them. I mean, it's just so good to see you. It's so good to see the journey over the last, what was that, 22 years ago?
22 years.
Yeah. So anyway, welcome to the Coaching Lab podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So redefining able, that's the heart of your message. That's the heart of where you're spending your time. Maybe that's a good place to start. I love the phrase. What does it mean beyond the obvious?
It just really means pushing yourself to achieve, to overcome obstacles, to kind of move through life in ways that might not be completely natural for most people, looking at things differently and trying to problem solve and just figure out how you can keep on plugging along toward your goals and really achieve the things that you want to. And also have the light, we have one life, right? And this is about living it regardless of what it looks like.
And you probably hear, I tend to hear people all the time that diminish their potential. I could never do that. Oh, I'm too old for that. Oh, ever since I turned, 40, 50, 60, I can no longer, my schedule doesn't allow. You hear that all the time. How do you respond to that? Or are there some red flags that you have people look for of words that they're using in their life that you say, oh, hold on, we're redefining able here. You got to catch yourself first. Are there any of those pieces that pop to the top for you as you're chatting with folks?
I think the first thing is that when somebody says I could never do that, I usually ask them, do you want to do that? Because I get that a lot. Like, I could never do an Ironman. And, really the bottom line is do you want to? Because I feel like, when there's something big in front of you that you are looking at and thinking that you can't do it, it's like, well, how hard are you willing to try? Because it really is about effort, and it's about, if you can't figure out how to do it, the way everybody else does. Like I never could do a triathlon, running because I am a wheelchair user, but how much was I willing to try to figure out new ways? And, one of the first things that I did when I got injured was I called my cycling coach, who had been my coach, prior to my injury. And I was like, I want to do a triathlon, but, they're saying I have to swim in open water and I can't see where I'm going because I only can swim backstroke due to my injury. And so Coach Kathy and I went to the reservoir and we're like, okay, let's figure this out. And so she swam next to me and I swam backstroke, and she started pointing different directions that I needed to swim in. And we just found a system, and we're like, okay, done, got that figured out, and then I was training on my hand cycle, and I realized that I was going to have to be really strong, really fit, have the endurance to do an entire triathlon with my arms. And same with the racing chair. So it's like, are you willing to look for new answers? Are you willing to look at things differently? Because if you're not willing to do that, if you're not wanting it, then you're never going to get to it. And so I think that's question number one is, do you want to do it?
Right. Make a decision. Is this a conversation piece, or is this a serious pursuit?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And there will be things that you do that you don't do well in, or things that you do that we would look at and say, oh, I failed. But it's also a learning experience. Okay, maybe this isn't for me, but maybe I could do something that's similar to it, or maybe I can, put my energy elsewhere. I mean, I think it's important to learn what you can do and what you don't really, have an aptitude for. But I think to automatically off the cuff say, oh, I could never do that, I think that's kind of a, you just letting yourself off the hook and saying, yeah, I just couldn't.
Yeah. Love that. So your life story is fascinating. As I mentioned, we met back in 2003. And I think you were on the video for when we first started Catalyst Coaching way back when in 2007. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, I think she was in our intro video.
Yes, when we looked so much younger.
What? That's why we're not publishing the video of this, Trish. This is audio only. But your story is so complex and so full. Could you walk us through some of the key tipping points in your life that made you who you are, and maybe even beginning before the accident, September 17th, 2000, and the path that took you on? So let's not start with the accident. Let's start before that, lead up to it, and then maybe some of the tipping points over that 25 years since then.
That's a kind of a loaded question because, I'm not young. So there's been a lot of things that have happened in my life. But something I've been researching lately as I'm writing another memoir is the fact that I was adopted. And I'm learning a lot about adoption as actual trauma being taken away from your birth mother immediately after being born. But also I am biracial, so I'm Black and white. And I am transracially adopted, which means I was adopted into a white family. So from the very beginning of my life, I've been having to adjust and to adapt into spaces that might be either uncomfortable for me or just different for me. My life followed a very different path than I think that it would have if I would have been with my biological parents. My biological mom was white, my biological father was Black. So I would have had more exposure to kind of the different parts of my identity. And so something that I've been learning now as I'm exploring this is how as an adoptee and as a biracial person, I've had to be a chameleon and be able to fit into all kinds of different situations and circumstances and groups of people. And so I think that's kind of where my resilience and my adaptation came from in the beginning. And then, starting sports was the thing that was like a level playing field for me. Like, it didn't matter what my skin looked like. It didn't matter that I had, my hair in an afro. It didn't matter that I had, a family that I looked nothing like, because I could get into the pool and I could win. And so my mom put all of her 4 children into the pool as little kids. I started when I was 4 years old. And so she had each one of us starting that early because she didn't know how to swim and she just wanted to make sure that we were safe. But, at the summer club, one thing turns to another and you end up on the summer club swim team. And so we all swam and I loved it. Like when I was an 8 and under breaststroker, the 25 breaststroke, I could get up on the blocks and I was like, I know I can beat all of you. It was a huge, like confidence boost. And I think that has really made all of the difference in my entire life is just, having that background in sports and being able to know that, yeah, I'm a good athlete. Like maybe I'm not the best athlete in the world, but I know I'm definitely above average. And I knew that as an 8-year-old because I had all these blue ribbons to show for it. And so, I think that sports has been, definitely part of who I am for every part in my life and has gotten me through every difficult spot, every challenge, because I had that confidence of like, okay, maybe I don't belong in this situation, but I know when I get out there on the floor doing gymnastics or on the block swimming, I know that I have talent and I know that I have confidence.
Love that.
So that's where it started.
Okay, good.
But then, I did swimming through elementary school on the summer club. In the winters, I would do gymnastics. And then when I got to high school, I swam and did gymnastics. At the end of high school, I hyperextended my knee on a move at the gym one day. And so and also I had grown to be 5'10". So who was I kidding, right? Like I'm not really going to be a gymnast. So I went to school at the University of Vermont, which is a Division I school, but not known for its swimming and diving. But I, went to the coach one day and I'm like, hey, I'm a gymnast. I have played around on the diving board. Can I walk onto the team? And she's like, well, if you're not afraid of the 3-meter diving board, because you're going to have to do the low board and the high board, so 1 and 3 meters. She's like, if you're not afraid, you can come to practices and we'll see how it goes. And I started on the team in 4th spot and I ended up around 2nd by the end of my 2 years at Vermont before I transferred to the University of Maryland. So I have a very can-do attitude and growth mindset when it comes to sports.
And always have.
And always have.
Yeah.
I wish it translated to everything. There are some things where I don't have as much like just go for it confidence. But I do have a willingness to try new things and to try to figure things out on my own. And, sometimes I'm just impulsive and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this and I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to do it. And the other things I'm a little bit more conservative on, but I definitely think that helped me as I got to kind of the big pivotal moment of my life, which was as I was a competitive cyclist in my late 20s, I was hit by a car while I was training and paralyzed from the chest down. So that was sort of like the big pivotal moment where all of the skills and all of my parts of my attitude and identity kind of came together and was like, okay, I need to put 100% of me into getting this figured out and getting through it. And so I think that's where my story kind of took on a new direction. And I think also my mindset went into a new space also.
And since then, just because we're going to be talking about all your different adventures here, you crack me up, my friend. I mean, you're awesome. and I actually want to circle back to your comment about you wish the growth mindset and the can-do attitude extended to everything. So I made a note of that, but hit a few more of the tipping points or crossroads, left turns over the last 22 years, because you've tried a whole bunch of stuff and it's really cool.
I have tried a bunch of stuff. It is not all worked out the way
As
I
it
wanted
never
it
should.
to.
Yes.
But yeah, so before I had my injury, I was a tandem pilot for a blind cyclist. So in 1998, I went to the World Cycling Championships for the disabled. That's what it was called at that time. Now we refer to it as paracycling, and it's very legit and high competition. At that time, it was definitely an emerging sport for Paralympic athletes. And so I rode on the front of a tandem and had two different athletes that I worked with who were visually impaired. They had some sight, but not enough to, ride a single bike. So I was the eyes of the bike, and together we were the motor. And we competed at the World Championships in 1998. And as part of that team, I had exposure to all kinds of different athletes with disabilities. So we had wheelchair users using hand cycles. We had athletes with CP riding on trikes. We had below the knee and above the knee amputees riding on single bikes that had modifications. So I had a lot of exposure to these athletes, and I really enjoyed it because they made me see that, there's many different ways to do things. And so when I had my injury, I had in the back of my head this confidence that once I get through kind of the acute part of this life change, there is something for me down the road that's, something worth getting excited about and something that I can do. And I don't have to, stay in a place where I feel sorry for myself. And I really feel like that was like probably the greatest gift that I could have had, because a lot of people when I was in the hospital didn't have that knowledge of like, oh, there's this whole world out there where you can be an athlete, you can compete in sports, you can, do anything you want to do and get back to, regular life. And, the hospital that I was at, Craig Rehabilitation Hospital in Colorado, is also a really great place to learn. They have a recreational therapy department that whatever makes you happy, whatever you love, they'll help you figure it out. So if it's gardening, if it's hunting, if it's swimming, if it, whatever it is, they will find a way to help you adapt equipment or find programs or just get started in it again. And so my rec therapist was great. She was like, I know you came in here an athlete. I'm going to make sure that you leave here an athlete.
Wow.
And she's like, hey, we got a lot of sports we can try. And so we did. In the beginning, swimming really sucked and I couldn't do it. But she got me on the hand cycle and in the racing chair, and it just kind of like went from there and gave me the momentum. But it was really nice to have that, information in my back pocket that a disability doesn't mean that your life is over.
Wow. And I found it curious, your phrasing, I jotted it down here. You're working with the blind athletes with this world championship team. And the phrase was, they made you see.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. All right, let's circle back to your comment earlier, because I think this might really hit folks where they're at. You kindly, authentically said, look, I'm known for having this resilience and this toughness and this can-do attitude, and I'm out there trying these new things. And I see in my own life, it doesn't extend to everything. Could you talk us through that, kind of what you've seen, maybe an example of where you've seen it not take? And I think that'll be an encouragement to folks that are like, yeah, I'm not like Trish. Well, maybe you are in a different way. I don't know. Let's just explore this a little bit and see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like business has been very intimidating. So I started my own business, of course, doing speaking and, trying to do some other things that like I never really launched. And I think, for me, a lot of it was just intimidation. Like, am I going to succeed? What is my safety net? Can I make a living at this? And I think that I've watched some other friends really take off in their businesses. I mean, I think you've done some amazing things with, the wellness company and now with your podcast and your PhD and all of these things. Like, I see that, when we first talked, you wanted to be the chief wellness officer. And not only does that position exist at the current company that I'm at, but you've done a great job of building a business, and, doing that is a risk. Anytime you're an entrepreneur. And so I think you have to find the places where, you are in your comfort zone, or you're out of your comfort zone, but you're okay with that. But I was, when it came to building, business, I was out of my comfort zone and not willing to be out of my comfort zone. And so that was one of those things where I was like, okay, maybe this, the entrepreneurial life isn't for me, because it does take that risk. It does take that confidence in yourself. And, I think just parts of my life have showed me, what happens when things don't work out right. So just to give you an example. So my mom and dad got a divorce when I was 7. My mom got remarried when I was 10, and her second husband was abusive, verbally abusive, and she really didn't have any backup. She had to stay in that relationship because she was of the generation where you got married and a man takes care of you. And, she hadn't finished college yet at that time. She eventually did finish. But I saw what she went through, the struggle of not having money and having to rely on somebody else. And, so things like that really colored what I felt comfortable doing. Sure. And for me, I want to know that I have money coming in. I want to know that I can take care of myself. I want to know that I'm not going to get into a huge heap of debt and then throw on top of that a disability, which is a very expensive proposition. And, the statistics out there are that, somebody who's a wheelchair user has to make $20,000 more a year than the average person to be able to afford their disability and the lifestyle that comes with that. So for me, it was too many unknowns and too many risks for me to just throw myself into it fully and say, okay, I'm going to do this, because I didn't want to find myself in a position where I had to rely on somebody else who I didn't want to be relying on, or who I wanted to be able to take care of myself. So I think it was just a lot of my life experiences that led up to, I don't feel like I have the confidence that I can totally go for this. So, that's one of those things where I think you have to look at it and say, but do you really want to? And even though I wanted to, I'm like, do I want it badly enough to risk everything? And I didn't, so for me, working in a traditional, 8 to 5 job is really what works for me. And then on the side, I have my hobbies, and I have my speaking business, and I write books, and I do all of these things. So for me, it's just like, okay, I feel better if I have a safety net. But when it comes to sports, it's like, I don't have anything to lose. It's like, I just took up the javelin, and I thought, I could suck at this.
Love that.
But also I could have a lot of fun with it, and a javelin is $100. And so you go take it out in your backyard and you start throwing it, it wasn't the risk of starting a business. So that's why I say, I don't know that it's necessarily like a growth mindset. It's just a cautious mindset. And it's a realistic mindset too, that I have, when it comes to certain things. And, finances is one of those, because I watched my mom go through this situation that was something that I never wanted to experience. So I guess that's why I say that I don't necessarily have that mindset in everything that I do.
Well, and maybe that's part of the strategy to provide to others is that's not good or bad. It's value neutral. It's based on how we were brought up. It's what we saw. It's what we experienced, what we lived through. And as a result of that, the question becomes, so how do you create that safety net? For you, you
Yes.
found that solution. You've heard the analogy. I think Seth Godin likes talking about this, where if you put a piece of tape on the ground and you have people walk on it, they have no problem with it at all. And then if you raise it on, and as a gymnast, you'll totally appreciate this. And if you raise it a foot in the air, they generally don't have any trouble walking across it. If you take that exact same width, exact same piece of wood, and you raise it 7 feet in the air, now people are freaking out. Like, I can't do that. You just did it. You just did it twice. You just did it on the same bar. I know, but it wasn't up there. Okay. So maybe that's the strategy is you want to do this thing. What does that look like with a safety net? What does the safety net, what is it comprised of? Can you, I always used to say, I can always find 10 hours a week to do something outside of my, at the time, VP of Ops role. So maybe that's, I don't know. I love the way you've done that. And I love the way you couch it and you position it and you tune into the reality of that. Cause I think that could be helpful for so many people. I just think there's so many influencers or motivational speakers or whatever that are on the extreme. And because they're on the extreme, no one can follow them because they're so ridiculous, and it gets clicks, it gets views, but it doesn't get, there's no reality to it. And you're bringing a reality of saying, go do your thing. Just build the safety net, the one you need. And then maybe there'll be times you can reduce the size of that net or whatever. So
exactly.
Love that. Love that. Your cycle of hope that's on your website, challenge, endurance, strength, character, hope. Can you flesh that out for us a little bit? I think there's a lot to that, a lot of depth. The words we get, again, they're challenge, endurance, strength, character, hope. But would love to have you take us on a little deeper dive through those.
Sure. So that all started with the Bible verse that I start my book with about, and you caught me kind of.
That's all right. I didn't warn you.
In terms of like what it is, and now I have to remember. But strength produces character, and character produces endurance, and endurance doesn't.
Hope. And hope does not disappoint.
Yes, and hope does not disappoint. Yes. Thank you for helping me through that. Anyway.
The charity fund that we do is the Spark of Hope Fund. And it's the same concept that we can't save everybody, but if we can provide that spark of hope. So it's based on the same verse. So yes, great choice.
Yes, exactly. So then when I kind of zoomed out on that, I'm like, okay, you have to have a certain amount of strength in different areas, which is going to be like mental toughness and the way that you guide yourself mentally. And you're going to have endurance, that's, going the distance and being able to see that there is a finish line, but that, you're going to have to go step by step. Character is about, who do you surround yourself with? Do you surround yourself with, the right people to be able to, get through this? And so really, I actually have a diagram that kind of takes you through those things that I think bring you back to hope. And what I really liked about this cycle is that we're all in some part of that cycle at every time in our life. And sometimes we're sort of at the bottom of that cycle and we're like, okay, how do we get out of this, hole that we've dug for ourselves? And then other times, we're at that place of hope where it's like, okay, everything is coming together and I feel good. And that's kind of how I went through my, injury in terms of there's that whole cycle of grief, but then there's that cycle of okay, how do I get back to a place where I'm living the life that I want to live in the way that I want to live it? And that was kind of what helped me get there. And it was a combination of being able to pursue my passion, of being an athlete. It was being able to have a purpose, and that at first was getting up every day and going to my job, when I went back to work full time after my injury. And then, it was having the right people, in my village to support me so that I could, do these things. So it was like Coach Kathy going to the reservoir and swimming with me to practice, or even, she went with me to New Zealand. She went with me to, some of the longer triathlons that I did. And, she was my my swimming buddy for a long time. And so just having those people who are willing to go out on those 4 mile an hour rides. One of my teammates went out with me. We rode for 4 hours, but we were literally riding between 4 and 8 miles an hour, and I don't know how he stuck with me through that, but he's like, I'm willing to help you train to get that endurance in your arms, that strength in your arms that you need to, move forward and do this. So like, I really feel like if you don't have those things, if you don't have that passion, you don't have that purpose and those people, you really aren't going to get very far. So that was, just kind of built into the cycle of hope as the way that you get from that, really deep hole that you're in to being able to emerge on the other side as a hopeful person. So that was kind of where that came from, was just looking back at my journal and looking at the things that I did or that I said that I felt kind of matched up with each of those things. So it was like, I didn't know about, naming your emotions as being something that is, will help you get through them. But that's what I was doing in my journal, and I didn't realize that goal setting was helping me, get from day to day through, like even the bad days. Like, if I have this goal that I'm going to do a half marathon, at least that gives me something to look forward to. And, that was a big thing for me, like having something to look forward to. And I applied for a grant and I got $5,000 from Balance Bar. And I just like started making plane tickets and entering races and, doing half marathons, like just races across the country. And I'd get to the starting line and I challenged myself to ask 3 questions of 3 of the other wheelchair racers there. So I could learn, like, what kind of wheels do you use? What kind of workouts do you do? How do you do this? How do you do that? And so it was just putting myself out there and building this strength and building this endurance and building these things that ultimately got me to where I was like, okay, I'm a pretty good athlete and I, am going to go out there and I'm going to do these marathons. I'm going to do triathlons. I'm going to try an Ironman, like all of these things that I never thought I could do, but I had that safety net, I guess, if you're going to look at it that way. And that was, those people and just being really passionate about what I was doing.
I love that. Love that. Let's try to flip this over to somebody who's grappling with not an injury necessarily, but some unexpected life change. Maybe it is an illness. Maybe it is an injury. Maybe it's a job change. Maybe it's a relationship that's been severed, but they're facing some, oh my gosh, how did I get here? What guidance might you provide or what thought processes, or just walk us down kind of where your mind goes if somebody came to you and said, Trish, like you had to do this on an extreme level. Here's what's happened to me. Where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the first thing is mental, kind of like thinking about, I don't know. I think we a lot of times go to the worst case scenario when something bad happens. I know I do that a lot. And
I'm with you.
I have to kind of like talk myself off that ledge. And, I feel like a lot of people go to like, instead of saying like, I'm having a bad day, it's like, all right, I'm like,
my life's over.
And everything's ended. It's like, no, this is just one day. Like this, it's part, I guess it's part kind of like the mindfulness, like stay in the present where you are. You're okay. You're breathing, you're thinking, you're just trying to work your way through this problem. And yeah, it's a big problem. But you have to take it step by step. And so, I think that's really important. And, start building the support system that can help you. Start, finding the tools that will work for you. Do you need to learn something to be able to move forward? Like for me, like if I had, when I had started my business, if I would have had more business knowledge, if I would have sat down and said, okay, what do I need to do to start a business? How much money do I need to have for my safety net? Who could I have for my mentor? Like those are the kinds of things that really help you when you're going through those difficult times. And I think a lot of people just think, I have to do this by myself. I have to do it on my own. I'm the only person who's going through this. And that's, not the case at all. Like we all are going through these, difficult times, but, if we reach out and ask for advice or ask for support, and we're just not used to doing that. And I think that that's probably like the very first place to start. And then also kind of knowing your end game, and getting excited about it. And that might also be considered, knowing your purpose or knowing your why. Like, there are all kinds of ways that you can look at that. But, for me, it was, I can go back to sports. I can do something that makes me happy. I can go back to work and I can do something that challenges my brain, and where people are expecting me to show up every day, giving me some accountability. I think that's important, but you can't just let yourself shut down, because that, you're already accepting defeat if that's what you do. And I know people who get into that spot and they're like, I'm done. And I can't put any more effort to it. And, I don't know, that's endurance, and that's something that you have to train for. And it's not something that you can just, like, it doesn't just happen. You have to be purposeful about your life, about the choices that you make. And yeah, you can make that choice to give up. But that's never going to be the place where happiness lies. So it's just looking at it as these little steps of things that you can do to make your situation better, or to be, not what it currently is.
Why don't we ask for support? Because you're right. Like, I think not everyone, but so many of us have that tendency. How did you get over that hurdle? I like how you said you go to these races, you'd ask 3 questions. Like, you were very purposeful in the way that you were asking for that help. Any guidance or ideas for people to get over that hurdle? If they're sitting there listening to you and going, oh yeah, like Trish, you just nailed, that's exactly my issue. What ways or what first steps or guidance could you give them to just get over that initial hurdle with that?
First of all, asking for help sucks. Like, it's just, it's not fun to feel like you need help with everything. And that, that's what I felt when I got out of the hospital. It's like, I can't go on a ride by myself because I can't get out of my bike by myself. And I can't, move this piece of heavy furniture because I can't move this piece of heavy furniture. And it was hard, and and it's not fun. But I think that, like, I think we are taught that, like, we're taught individuality, I think, and we're taught,
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah. And being independent. And I think that you really have to kind of analyze people who are successful, and nobody ever tells like the real story,
Exactly.
of like the hours that they spent at the computer trying to figure something out, or, the hours that it takes to sit down and write a book, or, people just don't talk about that. And so I think that, we really have to normalize the fact that it takes more than just you to get where you're going, and that people who are super successful, even though it looks like they did it all by themselves, they didn't. And there are going to be times when you have to ask for help. But then I think there are also times when you have to challenge yourself to say, okay, how can I do this in a way that, I can empower myself? So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a balance of, sucking it up and saying, hey, I need some help in this situation. And maybe it's just, I need a little encouragement, or I need a little bit of accountability. Or, I'm really struggling here. And I think that our, kind of the move toward being more straightforward and about mental health, I think that hopefully that helps to be able to tell somebody that you're struggling. And, I think that for me, there's having different classifications of people in your life. And I usually say, mentors, coaches, cheerleaders, challengers. And so that you have those people to go to, and, the mentors are people that you can go to and ask for advice, and coaches are the people who can kind of get you through the nitty gritty and the day by day. And like, had I hired a business coach, I might've felt more comfortable in my business. Because I know that, like, as an athlete, the first thing I do is like, what sport do I want to do? How do you do it? Who can help me do it? What equipment do I need? And then I go out and do it. And it feels very formulaic to me. So like, if you tell me you're going to start a new sport, then I'm like, okay, I know exactly that formula.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of have to figure that formula out for each thing that you do. But then, if you have those people who are your cheerleaders, and, you let them know, I need to rely on you for some reassurance, for some uplifting conversation, that kind of thing. And then find those people who are like doing what you're doing, and try to run alongside them, or even run a step, ahead of them. Those are like kind of your challengers or your pacers, like you would have in a running race. And like, who can I watch what they're doing and break that down to what I'm trying to do. And so, I feel like I kind of always try to put people in these buckets, so that I know who to go to for what situation I'm in, whether it's I need advice or I need cheerleading. Like, you have to build that support system. It's not optional at all when you're trying to do something big. And even if you're just trying to live day to day, it's still not optional. And I don't know, like, I've always been that conscious builder of community around me. And I think, again, it goes back to that, like, feeling different and, growing up as an adopted kid. Like, I just feel like I've always tried to hang on to friendships and hang on to people that make me feel like I'm part of a community and make me feel like I fit in and belong. And so that really paid off after my injury, because I had gazillions of people coming to my hospital room. I had, boxes of cards. I had well wishes from everywhere. And I was so glad that I had built that support system ahead of time, even though it wasn't like I knew that I was building it. But, I think a lot of people don't have that kind of a support system. And, like, I feel like you've done a really great job of that too, like putting yourself out there and getting people excited. And, you're a motivator and an inspirer. But also, the people that you're motivating and inspiring can also be your,
For sure.
cheerleading crew when you need it in the times that you have had a challenge or whatever to overcome. So you just have to build that and build people that you feel comfortable being vulnerable around, and build people who, can come through for you in a minute when you need it. And that's really, I think, kind of what you need to start with when, you're facing that hurdle, is like, okay, where's my support crew, and how can I help them? And start being able to ask those questions and ask for help, but also, empowering yourself and saying, okay, maybe I problem solve a couple times here and there about how I'm going to get something done on my own, if that's what I have to do.
Yeah. I like that balance. It's not, I just need other people to save me. And it's not, I just need to do it all myself. It's a mix. I love how you reminded us, or maybe for some people, it's the first time they heard it, that what you're reading in the books, what you see in the videos, what you see in the movies, it's not the reality. Like, there's so much deeper. There's so much behind the scenes. You and I tend to be the optimist, okay, we can overcome this, let's do this. But there's a scary side. Especially for the journey you've been through. I'd love to have, if you're willing to kind of pull that curtain back, not on the accident itself, but the 25 years since then almost, are the days that just suck. Like, you're ready to give up. The heartache, this isn't fair, this is why me pieces. Can you, because we all have those. You have them, I think, to the extreme. And I'm wondering if if maybe you're willing to share some of those tough times, it might be an encouragement to folks that maybe you're going through something like that right now in their own life.
Yeah, I think so. For a lot of my time of, being a wheelchair user, people do turn to me for motivation and inspiration. And,
Totally.
Like I'll make a post on social media and everybody be like, oh, you're so inspiring. Oh,
Totally.
that's so great. That's so wonderful. And, and that is great. But, there are days when I'm like, 25 years in a wheelchair is enough. Like, this is very challenging because every day is like continual problem solving,
just the
continually
basics.
Trying to deal with accessibility issues and things like that. And, so it's difficult, and you can't require yourself to always be upbeat and inspiring. And I don't want to be that person who, I don't want to get on social media and be like, oh, life is awful. And, there are also those people, who just want to kind of like take you down with them, or like misery loves company.
Right.
But I think you just have to be realistic that every day is not going to be a perfect day. And at some points, you just have to be able to say, I can't be, the savior of somebody else's day. Like today I don't have a motivational post for you. I've been watching this show, binging on Netflix called All American. And the main character, who's a football player, he's always the person who wants to save everybody else and take care of everyone else. And yesterday I watched an episode. He's like, sometimes you just have to sit back and let other people do the saving, and maybe saving you. And so if you're willing to let other people step in, or just be able to step out of situations when they're not healthy, you just be mindful of that. And of course, I can't just step out of my wheelchair just because it's unhealthy for my brain on particular days, but like, just kind of cutting yourself some slack and being like, what, this does suck. And it is really hard. And I'm going to sit in the suck of it today. And then tomorrow I'm going to get back up and I'm going to get moving. And a story that I like to tell is that when I was 10 and I was at gymnastics practice, I was showing off. I was doing a round off back handspring while I was supposed to be moving across the mat to where we were having a little meeting. And while everybody else walked, I was going to do the round off back handspring. And I stopped in the middle of the back handspring and I fell and broke my arm. And so, my coach calls my mom and my mom picks me up. We go to the hospital and have to get an x-ray and I have to get a cast. And it's like in May. So school is about to be out for the summer, which means summer swim team was out of the question. Gymnastics was out of the question. Like, what am I going to do? And my mom on the way home, she was, I had been like sobbing and feeling sorry for myself. And she turned and she looked at me and she said, I know this is really hard for you, Trish, but here's the thing, like, you're going to have to pick yourself up and figure out something else for the summer. So she said, I'll let you cry as much as you want tonight, but in the morning, you're going to get up, you're going to call Stacy, your best friend, and you guys are going to figure out something that you can do for the summer that doesn't include swimming or gymnastics. And so that's what I did. And we created a beauty salon and we put our hair in different styles and offered up different shampoos. Like we had this whole beauty salon thing going and we had so much fun and we didn't, I wasn't thinking about sports and, and that was really a good lesson that like, yeah, you can feel sorry for yourself and you should like give yourself time to grieve whatever's happened, but also kind of give yourself a little bit of a deadline to say, okay, I'm going to pick myself back up and I'm going to move forward from here. And when I was in the hospital after my injury, my mom reminded me of this story and she's like, I'm not going to say you have to figure it out by tomorrow, but she's like, this is something that we're going to have to get through, the difficult part, the grief of this, the everything, like the transition in your life and all of that. But she said, eventually, you're going to have to figure out a way that you can make peace with this and move forward. And so, like I always remind myself of that because, people who get stuck in that grief, like, again, you can't get to that place of hope if you're just going to be sitting in that hole of misery the suffering. That's where the Bible verse starts, is suffering. You can't get past that if you're just going to sit in it and say, my life is horrible, or that person did me wrong, or, I could say that all day, that the woman who hit me wasn't paying attention. She ruined my life. She changed my life. She made my life more expensive. She did all these things. I could stay in that spot, but the only person that's hurting is me. If I'm not moving forward, if I'm not getting myself back to life the way I know it, or the way I want it, or to be, in a place where I can be happy, it doesn't do you any good to be mad at somebody forever. And because you're not doing anything to them. Like you're festering over it, you're ruminating over it, whatever. And they're just going on with their day, and you're the one who's paying for it. So, why? Just give yourself a reason to get up every morning and get it done is really kind of the attitude I think that you have to take.
Your mom sounds amazing. Like, I love that.
Was. Yes.
I love that. Like, that's the 24-hour rule you hear all the time. You get, whether it's celebrating or being bummed out, you had a terrible race, you had a bad test, you had a great test, you had a great race, you got 24 hours. Celebrate it, but then put it behind you, or sit in it, but then put it behind you. And she was saying that, 30 years ago, before people were writing about this 24-hour rule. So, that's awesome. For people that didn't have your mom there at your age of 10 to get that advice, and they're sitting in it, and they've been sitting in it for a few weeks, a few months, a few years. Any sparks to kind of just get that fire going a little bit and remind them? I mean, you've given us the paragraphs of, look, it's you're hurt. Like, you're not hurting that other person. You're just making your own life worse, and it continues to build compounding debt interest in the wrong direction with each day that you continue it. Any just little ways to be like, here's a little something you can do to just tweak that thing.
I mean, I think first of all, it's a decision. It really is a decision. And you have to say, I don't want to feel like this anymore. And then that's where the game plan comes in.
And I'm not going to feel this way anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you have to make the game plan. And, for me, when I was injured, a lot of it was like, what can I put on my calendar that I can look forward to? Something that's going to get me through these bad days, because I know that a good day is coming, and it might be, next week. For me with the races, it was like, okay, in 2 weeks, I have something to look forward to. So I'm going to, just kind of trudge through the next couple of weeks, do the best I can on each day that each day that comes, and then I will have something to look forward to. And, but it really has to be something where you actively want to. I think it's like anything else, like, unless you're willing to, admit that you have a problem or an issue and that you want to solve it and you want things to be different or better. Like, if you can't do that, if you can't decide that you want things to be better, then they're never going to get better, because then it's not going to motivate you to take any steps. So that really is a personal decision. And, I think a lot of people just don't make it. They don't say, or they want something for nothing, and you don't get something for nothing in this world. You don't get to the Olympics just because you wanted to. You get to the Olympics because you did all the little things every single day that you needed to do to achieve that level of, athleticism. And I think it's the same thing for just, everyday person. Like, you don't get to be at a really great job unless you've done the things that you need to do. You don't get to be super happy unless you've done the self-care and the personal growth and the personal awareness and, all of those kinds of things. And if you can't always do it alone. And I'm a big proponent of having, going to therapy, or asking somebody to be your coach, or asking somebody to be your, guidance, or just kind of helping you along the way. It doesn't, you don't have to go pay a therapist. You can ask somebody to be an accountability partner. Hey, will you make sure that I do X by this certain date? Make sure that I've, done X, Y, and Z. And, gotten out of the house and done something productive or, reached out there. Like I've realized that I don't have as many sporty friends as I used to. Like as we are getting on and aging, I still want to compete and go out to the races. And, my other cycling teammates and things, that they don't want to do that anymore. Maybe they're raising their families, or maybe they feel too old, or maybe they're not interested in competition. And so I have challenged myself to join a cycling club and join a running club and find people who do still get fired up by that. Cause I have a whole list of races I want to do this year and I want people to do it with. So, you have to take control of the situation and say, okay, what are the steps that I need to take to be able to move forward?
I just wrote down, develop the game plan. Those 4 words. I think there's so much to that. I asked you this question thinking, I don't know, this is a huge question. And when you said that, I'm like, that's it. And I know it's not it. There's no it. But folks, listen to what she's saying. When you're feeling sorry for yourself, when you're discouraged, when you're afraid, when you're uncertain, develop a game plan. It may not be the right game plan. We're going to change it. We adjust as the other aspects of life come at us. But once you have it, at least you know what the next step is. It may change a month from now or tomorrow. But, oh my gosh, as you were saying that, I just thought of all the times that I've been struggling or uncertain or afraid, if I have a game plan, even if it ends up being not exactly the right game plan, that gets me moving. It gives me the next step. So I love that. If that's not part of your speeches yet, my friend, that needs to be thrown in there. That is awesome. I have so many more questions. We're not going to fit them all. Let's see. Okay, so here's one. What's one piece of advice or lesson you wish you could go back and give yourself right after your accident? It sounds like your mom gave you the big one. But is there something else that pops into your mind that as you're laying there, or maybe a week or 2 out after you've let things kind of rotate around in your head a little bit, that you wish you would have had you there to say or to ask or suggest this?
I think it's probably just be patient. Be patient with the situation and be patient with yourself. Because I saw a quote or statistic or something that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So like we might see somebody just pop up in the news one day and they're an influencer and they have like 20 million followers and whatever. And we think, wow, they just came out of nowhere and all of it. But it's not like that. It's, it's building over time. And maybe it was unintentional to begin with. But as you keep on going, it gets more intentional because you can hone in on your goal and figure out where you want to be. But it's not going to happen, just overnight. So you have to be patient. And it's one of those things, like, again, like you go back to the influencer and the social media. It's like, okay, I have to get 2 more followers and then you have to get 2 more followers. And maybe you'll get lucky and you'll have that, big news story that suddenly makes 3,000 people follow you. But in general, it's that like 2 a day, 3 a day. It's just, okay, I'm going to learn something new today and I'm going to try it tomorrow. And then I'm going to refine it on the next day. And then I'm going to perfect it. And then I'm going to go to my next, part of my game plan, and I'm going to try it and, fix what doesn't work. And then I'm going to change it, then reflect on it. I mean, it's an iterative process. And I think that as athletes, we know that when something bad happens, on the field of play or in the middle of a triathlon, that it's the athlete who gets back in the game fastest that is going to have the least effect on their performance. So let's say in the middle of the Ironman, 2 different cyclists crash and one cyclist sits on the side of the road and throws a tantrum and, is mad because they have a flat. And then the other cyclist says, okay, I need to get my tube out. I need to change this flat. I need to get up, take a drink of my Gatorade and start riding again. And you have that game plan and you can go. So, it's like, if you can't respond quickly, if you can't adjust and be agile, then, that's going to make it more difficult for you to move forward. So I think it's just, knowing that it's going to be an iteration, knowing that sometimes things are going to work, sometimes they're not, but having your eye on the goal and knowing what you're trying to achieve is everything. Like if you are purposefulness and you cannot find that purpose, you're not going to move forward. So, and that purpose can change,
Totally.
For me, it was like, okay, I want to be an athlete, but like other things came along and I started a camp for female wheelchair users, and I, got involved in disability advocacy, and, my finish line changes and my process changes, but I always have something that I've got my eye on that I want to accomplish, or at least move in that direction. And maybe it'll change and I'll go in another direction. But, if you can't start with a direction of some sort, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Good. Oh, okay. So wheelchair sports, adaptive athletics, what's one myth or misconception that you'd like to dispel? Folks that are not engaged in it, don't have family members or not competing themselves, onlookers, what's something that you're like, oh, you just don't, you don't get it. There's this. What's the this?
Well, a couple things. So adaptive athletics. I have in the past been training for the Paralympics. And a lot of times people don't understand that the Paralympics is high level cutthroat athletics, just like the Olympics are, and that athletes with disabilities train and, push themselves to be able to get to the highest level of sport. And I don't think we have an appreciation yet for how intense and how difficult it is to be involved in para sports, and that those athletes aren't just, it's not everybody plays, everybody wins. You just sign up for the race and you go. And there are times and places for that type of situation, but for Paralympic athletes, it's really serious. But I also
respecting that element is the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But then I also want people to realize that these athletes have to do so much more just to get to the start line than other athletes. Your Paralympians have probably had a more difficult time getting to that start line than the Olympians, because you have to overcome attitudes, you have to overcome accessibility barriers, you have to overcome, the challenges of the sports equipment costing 3 and 4 times as much as it does for a non-disabled athlete. And so I think it's really important to value that journey that it takes to be a disabled athlete, because, there's so many more barriers, yet people still show up, they still push hard, and they still, compete at the highest level. And I don't feel like Paralympic athletes and athletes with disabilities get quite the respect that, non-disabled counterparts do, just knowing everything that it takes to put together those performances and make them really great.
And then on a subtle level, so you're at the Boulder, and which for folks that aren't runners, that's a 10K here in Colorado. It's like 45,000 people or whatever. And there's a wheelchair group or wave that starts first. And so if you come across, interact with, have them pass you, whatever, in that race or as you're warming up, or Fort Collins Running Club, we have Paralympic athletes that are out there with the wheelchairs at our track practice. It's amazing. I'm so impressed by them. But what words, what actions demonstrate that respect, demonstrate that encouragement? Because they're so motivating to me. And I just try to be like, way to go. Like, that's awesome. Good to see you. But is that the wrong thing to be doing? Is there a different thing that would show more respect or more encouragement? Can you kind of peel that back for us a little bit on what you're like, oh, seriously, you're going to tell me that?
Yeah. Like for me and for a lot of athletes with disabilities, the word inspiring gets overused,
like overkill,
and just kind of thrown out there. And because a lot of times what's behind that is it's nice to see you out here despite your disability, because I would be sitting at home on my couch, waiting for my life to end.
Right.
Like that. It's a loaded word. And so that can be very frustrating, but like, when I'm in a race and people are cheering me on, like they would cheer anybody else, like, wow, you look strong. Like you were fast, those things that show that I'm an athlete first, not that I'm like, oh yeah, you're a little disabled person and you're out here on this course and you should be, feeling sorry for yourself, but you're not. Like that is belittling. But if somebody is like, wow, Tricia, you're looking fit, you're pretty cut, then that acknowledges the fact that I've been training, that I've been lifting, that I've been getting up and getting out on the bike in the morning, when I would rather be sleeping, or, you know what I mean? So I think it's just treating an athlete like an athlete instead of looking at their disability. And so, I say that with anything you say to a disabled person, always take the disability out of the statement first and make sure that you would say something like that to a non-disabled person, so don't ask questions or say things that you wouldn't say to somebody else, because they would feel, like just kind of thrown out there, not really well thought out. However, I will say I was climbing Lookout Mountain the other day on my hand cycle, and I was appreciating pretty much everything that people were saying, because that's a hard climb. And I know that the cyclists can appreciate that, because they're in the middle of the climb too. And it's hard when you're doing it with your legs. Yep. So I get good respect when I'm doing it with my arms. And so when people are like, dang girl, this is awesome. You've got strong arms, like I do appreciate that, but I don't like it when people are like, oh, you doing this despite the fact that you have a disability and you shouldn't be a happy, active athlete, Yeah,
that's helpful. Thank you. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I'm writing a book based on my PhD work on functional mental toughness, and it's titled, or at least the working title is The Toughness Myth. From your perspective, what are some of the fake versions of toughness that you've come across? Because you see it all.
I think that there's a myth that like people aren't working for it all the time. Like you're a natural, you've got this natural ability, you just go out there and do that. When you are mentally tough, that means having, like all that background stuff that we talked about. It means that you have doubts, but that you're willing to push through them. It means that you have challenges, but you're willing to push through them. It means that you hate asking for help, but you're willing to put yourself out there and ask for help. So I think that's probably a big myth, is that success comes without work for some people. And I think that when people do make it, and they make it big, and they just go out there and praise themselves and seem very like, look at what I did. Like they're not doing a courtesy to those of us who are still trying. And I think that's sometimes like what you're talking about, like with motivational speakers, like they're so far and away, like I was $600,000 in debt and then I wasn't. I was like, well, what happened in those 12 years? Like, what did you have to do to get out of that $600,000 in debt? Because you're not telling me anything that's like useful. You're not giving me a tip as to what I need to do. So it's like, I just, started a podcast.
Positive thinking.
Yes, exactly. I started a podcast and I was positive that I'd get followers, and then I got all these followers, and then I ended up on the Today Show. It's like, there's some steps missing in that. So, I think that, I don't know, just being able to tell people that there's a lot more to success, and that success looks like, some really difficult days, and it looks like a lot of setbacks, and it looks like a lot of work, and it is all of those things. And to think that it's not a multi-step process that, doesn't take a lot of years and a lot of patience, that would be incorrect.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, a couple more. Which ones do I want to pick here? We've got still a long list. What You've talked about that. Let's wrap with this one. So you get a billboard. Millions of people are going to see it each year. Besides hire Tricia to speak at your next event, what message to the world would you want to put on that billboard?
I feel like I have a couple of things that I have shared with audiences and in things that I've written that I would put on there. One of them is ride your own race. Like, I think it's so important that we not compare ourselves against other people. And I say that as a person who does a very good job of comparing myself to other people. But, you know, like I was in a bike race one time and like the whole field rode away from me. Like I bonked and I did horrible. And this woman who she rode up next to me, she was in one of the other categories. And I was like, I'm a horrible athlete. I can't do this. And, you know, she's like, you can't, you know, gauge yourself as an athlete by just one race, you know? And she said, all you can do is ride your own race. And that has always stuck with me because, you know, like I use a wheelchair. Like there are going to be some things that I cannot do as well as somebody who doesn't use a wheelchair, but I can ride my own race and I can do the things that I can do and I can do them to the best of my abilities. And I don't have to worry about what somebody else is doing. That's better. And then the other one is just work hard, do a little more every day, stay patient, and don't give up. Because that has really been like sort of the mantra that I've given to myself is that, you know, it is hard work to come back from an injury. It is hard work to train for a sport. It is hard work to start a business. It is hard work to, you know, be married and show up as a great partner. It is, you know, but you just put in the work day by day and, you know, you stay patient and you don't give up. And so I think for me, that's a great mantra also when, you know, when things are getting tough or when I'm starting something new and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. Yeah. You know, I just have to remind myself that, yeah, it's not going to be easy in the beginning and you're going to be in a, you know, out of your comfort zone, but the outside of your comfort zone places where you learn, where you grow, where you get better. And if you're not willing to get out of your comfort zone, you know, you're not going to get there. And just because, you know, like when I'm out of my comfort zone, I cry, I throw tantrums, I get mad, I do all of these things, but like honor that and don't let it last forever and say, okay, I'm going to be mad about this right now. I'm going to be worried about this right now, but like give yourself, you know, like that 24-hour rule. Yeah, tomorrow I'm going to hit it again and I'm going to try to do it better. And I'm going to know who I can ask for help. I'm going to find those mentors and those coaches and those cheerleaders, and I'm going to get it done.
I love that. That's so good. Trish, it's great to see you. It's great to see what you're doing. Thank you for joining us today. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
What a joy to have Tricia join us. We've included a link to her website in the description so you can follow her ongoing journey or contact her for your next event or maybe to access one of her books. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about your current or future coaching career at results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com or tap into additional health, wellness, and performance resources on the website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And now, it's time to be a catalyst. This is Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching. I will speak with you soon on another episode of the Coaching Lab podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.